Good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to the latest Host in Ireland webinar, Digital Infrastructure and Irish Export Success. Just a few housekeeping tips before we get underway here. The format for today's webinar will be first of all, we'll kick off with a chat with our panelists, and we'll follow that with a Q&A session. You can, of course, input questions at any time during the webinar. You don't have to wait until the Q&A session begins. You can simply do that by using your Q&A button there, located at the bottom of your screen. If you are joining us today from LinkedIn Live, Stephen is standing by to take any note of any questions you may have there, and we'll pop it into the chat here for our panelists in the room. For those of you who are no stranger to Host in Ireland webinars, you know we get quite a few questions. So we will try to get to as many as we possibly can today, but we do expect quite a lot of questions. So we suggest that you read through the questions that have already been posted and simply upweigh any question that might be similar to yours. By registering for today's webinar, you will, of course, be getting first access to our ecosystem report, which launches today. This will be mailed to your inbox this afternoon. If you have any colleagues who would also like a copy of the ecosystem report, Mira will be popping a link into the chat during this morning's session that you can share with your colleagues so they can sign up to get a copy. So that's it. So without further ado, I will hand over to our moderator for today's webinar, Joyce. To you, Joyce.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks, Tanya, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you're joining us from. Thanks so much for joining us today. I definitely wanted to take a chance to welcome you to the Host in Ireland webinar, Digital Infrastructure and Irish Export Success. As Tanya said, my name is Joyce Wadey. I am Head of Communications for Host in Ireland, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. We're really glad you can join us. It's been an exciting day for us. As Tanya just mentioned, we are launching the 2023 ecosystem report. This year, we're kind of focusing on Ireland's thriving digital infrastructure ecosystem. And last year, when we launched the inaugural report, we really kind of focused on introducing the concept and defining what the Irish digital infrastructure ecosystem is. We explored what made Ireland an intrinsic home to digital infrastructure and Irish companies so successful. And what we found out as we were, having conversations, doing research for the report, that there was definitely a common thread that ran throughout the companies that were working within and from Ireland. And it didn't matter how big or small they were. And what we found was ingenuity, relentlessness, integrity, strength, and history. And if you're paying close attention, we're going to, do one of the tech industry's favorite things and create an acronym. And that acronym happens to be Irish. So throughout the year, we had a lot of great feedback from our partners and from the industry as a whole, but we definitely realized that there was still more of the story to tell. And the question that kept kind of bubbling to the surface was, why have companies doing business in and from Ireland been able to influence the global data center market so successfully? So with that, that's what we decided to try to answer that question this year in the 2023 report. And so we're really trying to take a look this year at the ecosystem in action, so to speak. We're looking at why the Irish ecosystem is in such demand on global projects and what are the characteristics of it that make it so transportable. We're also trying to understand why the talent that comes through or from Ireland is so highly sought after and why that makes it one of the most exportable and successful elements of the industry. So before we kind of get started, I think it's definitely worth taking a minute to look back at why this is all so important. 2023 marks the 50th anniversary of Ireland becoming a full member of the European Economic Community, which obviously was the precursor to today's European Union. And in those 5 years, we've seen Ireland develop from an agricultural-based economy with high unemployment and high immigration to a tech-led economy with low unemployment and becoming a net importer of people. And none of this is by accident. The transformative effects of technology and other data-led industries, as well as pharmaceuticals, finance, life sciences, the effect that it's had on the country over the last 50 years has rightly earned Ireland a prominent role on the world stage and equipped the digital infrastructure industry to be more strongly positioned than ever before. And as we look ahead, digital infrastructure is going to continue to play a very key role, especially when we talk about decarbonizing society. This is clearly one of the most pressing issues that we are facing as global citizens. We're seeing smart transport, smart buildings, smart agriculture, smart grids, all these things working together to optimize energy usage and facilitate the transition to a sustainable economy. And all of these things are underpinned by digital infrastructure and data centers. We're also starting to move to a bit more of a prosumer era of electricity, where both consumers and businesses are going to start to engage in a little bit more of a give and take kind of relationship with electrical grids. We're seeing examples of this already taking place today with the lithium-ion batteries that are lithium-ion battery banks in place at the Microsoft's facility in Dublin. We're seeing this with the heat waste recovery projects that are happening for district heating, both in Ireland and across Europe. And we're also seeing energy parks starting to be created that are really going to be with the intention of co-locating renewable energy and high energy uses on the same campus to really maximize that reusable, renewable energy that they're producing. So what we're seeing really with all of these societal drivers in place is that the demand for talent and digital infrastructure expertise has never been greater, and in many ways never been in such short supply either. And it really opens the opportunity for the Irish ecosystem to continue to make its mark, and it really kind of accentuates the timeliness of our discussion that we're going to have today. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and meet our speakers who are going to help us dig into all these topics for the next 50 minutes or so. First off, we have Barry Sullivan. Barry is the Global Projects Director for CBRE, and he's going to share with us his thoughts on why the Irish digital infrastructure ecosystem has been a key influencer in the global market. We also have with us Ailish McDonald, and Ailish is the Senior Development Manager for Yonder. And Ailish is going to help us kind of take a look at why Irish talent is so coveted around the world. And finally, we have Judith Gardner, who's the VP of Growth and Emerging Markets for Equinix. And Judith is going to help us look ahead at the impact this is all having and how the next generation of talent is influencing the market as well. So if you'd like, let's go ahead and get started. Barry, I'm going to start with you. In your role, you have a really great global purview on data center projects that are happening, around the world that CBRE is involved with. When you take a look at the Irish digital infrastructure ecosystem, how do you define it, and why do you think it's in such demand on global projects?
Yep, thanks very much, Joyce. I suppose from my perspective, I moved into a global role about 12 months ago. So I was very much focused in the EMEA world, of which the Irish export and infrastructure in relation to contractors and vendors is the majority, delivering data center works in EMEA. What has been really surprising in my travels to kind of pick up the APAC regions and the Americas region is the diaspora, the Irish diaspora that's out there that support global projects, moved over, emigrated, moved up the food chain in relation to co-location companies or hyperscale companies. So for an example, I was with Gary in PTC this year, and we were having a conversation and a coffee, and was introduced to a gentleman that works with Ailish's company based out of San Francisco, but he's from Blackside Bay in Balmullet, right? So that's the example of like the Irish diaspora working in this sector. I think a lot comes back to our education system in Ireland, and our mentorship approach within organizations. Like, we've got a really good education system, and we complete that, and then we move into companies and contractors and vendors that help support the growth of individual skill sets and upskill and educate people. I know from my perspective, I was with various different companies, and in every company I was with, I learned more from my managers, from my directors than I ever did in the education system. So I do believe it's very much a hands-on approach from an Irish perspective, and it's really refreshing to see in the 12 months that I've taken up ownership of a global role, how much the Irish influence is across the whole global geographic area.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about mentorships, because I think one of the things that we've learned a lot about in the last 2 years as we've been doing this is the key role that relationships play, and whether that is within companies or that's with between, you know, the company, like companies like CBRE and your customers, and how that kind of opens doors and how that kind of brings the ecosystem into new markets and into different regions. You know, could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
I suppose, like, we've got as a nation, I think we've got an exceptional brand, and not just in the data center space, but I think it's to do a lot. Like, if we're looking at it from a high level perspective, it's probably to do with, it started with the famine and the immigration. We've effectively, like, there's Irish bars, for a stereotypical thing, in every town and village across the globe. And that's really because Irish people are, I think, workers by nature. And when there wasn't work in Ireland, we transgressed and moved abroad and built up communities and built up reputations in the States, across Europe, and in APAC. So from that perspective, I think we're very much a can-do nation, in my opinion. And I think over the course of the last 150 years, we've built up communities and reputations within different countries that are able to support new people coming into that region. One example I have is I do a considerable amount of travel. In my new role, every time I get on a flight, I see Irish contractors traveling to the same locations, probably talking to the same companies that I am. But there's a community system there. Like, everybody wants to win, everybody wants to succeed. I think that is one of the key aspects. You feel part of something. Hosting Ireland is very similar to that. You feel part of a community, and that's for the greater good. Collaboration, engagement, discussions. We learn as we go, and I think Irish people have that kind of attitude, and I think we've got a really good brand in all sectors, and it's really based on the last 150 years of people emigrating, finding new homes, engaging relationships, and building communities and ecosystems within that region and that country.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, kind of to your point, as everybody saw at the start of the webinar, the Host in Ireland tagline is success through collaboration, and I think that it's something that means a lot to us as a team, but I think you're absolutely right. And there is definitely all what the rising tides, right, raise all boats, or however, no, I'm not getting that quite right. But I think there is definitely that sentiment across the industry for sure.
The ecosystem report, which I got a bootleg version of, one of the things that really jumped out to me was 67% of respondents are planning to or are exporting goods and services into the wider market, which is a phenomenal percentage. Like, that was really, it jumped off the page to me, and it's testament to our skill set, our knowledge base, and also the can-do attitude that we have. I know it's very stereotypical, but have passport, will travel, kind of can-do attitude. And I think that plus honesty, a lot of people that I deal with, from customers to vendors to contractors, they like an honest approach, honesty. I think as a nation and as a people, I think that comes across as in we're honest with people, what we can and can't do. And I think that's a testament to a longevity in this sector.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Well, so let me pause you there for a second, Barry. We're going to open this up to a group discussion amongst all of us in a few minutes. I'm going to kind of pivot over to Ailish at this moment in time. Ailish, you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago that we were really digging into the idea that the data center industry looks to Ireland for skills and services for their global projects. Why do you think that is?
I guess, as Gary loves to do, we'll take probably a little bit of a history lesson. You need to go, a bit far back and try to determine which came first, chicken or egg. So really, in my opinion, it boils down to a skilled workforce. How did that come about? Was it a reaction to a kind of, the supportive government at that time to bring in foreign direct investment? And that was a knock-on effect to our universities and driving that strong history of technology courses and engineering courses. As I said, the support of government through tax incentives, and even then further down to the data center industry with the IDA. And I suppose the third factor being something that no one wants to talk about is the corporation tax and the incentives for technology research. So all that, I think, that kind of trifecta kind of brought together that kind of, firstly that steady stream of qualified professionals, and then a good environment for technology companies to locate a base here. So that's, I think all that just helped kind of, attract those technology companies and really kickstarted Ireland as a base, as that kind of, and we're like early adopters, I guess, to the technology regime. That's.
Well, and I think Yonder has been a really good, interesting example kind of that, because you guys don't have a data center, actually a physical data center located in Ireland, but I mean, the team that you are, that you work with it's the design and the development, and it's a lot of the the foundation work for, the data centers that you do are all based out of Ireland. Can you talk a little bit about that maybe?
Yeah, I think, Yonder is a relatively young company. We're only a couple of years old. But it was really important to Yonder to develop an office here in Dublin. I think from the start, we probably knew that we would never, well, not never say never, but it would be extremely difficult for us to develop a data center in Ireland. But yet, we focused on developing the development team from Ireland. The particular skill sets that Irish people have, what Barry touched on a little bit earlier, was that, this kind of this strong work ethic, our adaptability, and our kind of cultural awareness, our ability to kind of move into other regions and parts of the world with ease and openness. So really important in the development function, really important when you're seeking land opportunities and development opportunities in other regions. So I think that, that's something that, this is why that we located our EMEA development function in Dublin.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I think you guys you guys have been able to kind of put it into a lot of that's a really good example of putting into action the kind of stuff that we're talking about today.
Exactly. So we're always seeking new opportunities all across EMEA. And as I said, the majority of the team being in Dublin, just, going out there, meeting with landowners and municipalities and all that, and just bringing our Irishness to the conversation.
Exactly. So great. Well, and Judith, you've been in the industry for a while, and you're Irish, but you've been living and working in other countries for a lot of that time. So I think you definitely have an interesting perspective to share with us on this whole discussion. And I think if I remember what Gary said right in our prep call for this, he called you, he was referring to everyone all of our speakers today being exemplars of what we're trying to discuss and put into action. So one of the things that you had mentioned when we were talking was about the difference that you're seeing in the students coming out of universities and the apprenticeships and the approach that that they have to the industry. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe as a comparison from when you were first starting and in this career, and then kind of what you think that means for the industry moving forward?
Sure. So thanks, Joyce. So I guess if I think about how I even got into this industry, I was very much a product of the 90s Ireland in terms of leaving school around that time. I went into accountancy. And at that time, it was really the beginning of the Celtic Tiger, and technology looked really interesting. So I kind of, once I left and qualified as an accountant, I left Deloitte and joined a tech company. And kind of from there, that's where my tech career began. And it wasn't long before I kind of left the accountancy behind and got into the more operational areas, sales operations, the commercial side, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I entered the data center industry, I suppose, 10 years ago. And at the time, I didn't realize, I suppose, how cool it was and the stuff that we do. And in terms of just the Irish diaspora piece, like everything that, you know, what drives us and what makes us stand out is very much the case. But also just seeing how we've kind of got these hubs bubbling around Europe now. Particularly, you know, our design and construction one out of Dublin. Our head of design for the global data center for Equinix is based out of Dublin, and there's a lot of it is generated just by both the data center industry that has evolved, but what, to your point, is coming out of the universities and technicians and apprenticeships, in the whole kind of electricity world or the electrical world. Yeah. And the thing that where we are now, though, is that there's to your point that you made earlier, the supply is exceeding the demand, or vice versa, and we're in a hyper growth situation, which we don't have enough people actually coming into the industry that we can hire for design and construction or from a technician role. Like last year, we hired 450 people in Europe into the operations team. Yeah. And we're hiring another 400 this year. And we're now at the stage where we're really finding it difficult to kind of go through the traditional lines of how we would find people to run data centers. So we've started really looking at not just the skill set, but the mindset and the aptitude. And we're not necessarily saying you need to have trained in this world to be part of it. We're looking at a lot of people that are new to career or are in parallel careers, like in the aircraft or military even. We have a retired athletes program. So it's very much, again, the mindset that fits with what we would consider why Irish people, I guess, have just become successful in the various parts of the world, particularly in the tech industry and very much in the data center industry. But yeah, there's a lot more focus now on internships and apprenticeships, and you don't need to have gone to college, and you don't need to have a degree. You don't need to have the things that we probably would have looked at as the default many years ago, which I think makes it even more exciting for this industry to become diverse, not from just even a gender perspective, but from a mindset perspective, and across the whole gambit, which I think this industry needs, because it's not just about building a data center and filling it with a bunch of servers. It's now in a way more innovative and exciting place that it's moving into, and particularly around the sustainability side. You know, I think the challenges we've had on power and the things that have been generated around kind of the war in Ukraine, et cetera, around power and sustainability is really even going to drive the data center industry further, as we're operating these super efficient places, which are helping companies even achieve their sustainability goals. So there's a lot of really exciting things, I think, happening right now that are very multifaceted. And I think it just even opens up more opportunity to Irish people. And I think the have passport, will travel is incredibly important. I really enjoy, I have 10 countries plus the Middle East, and I think on average, I meet at least one or two, even in the most bizarre places that I end up. There'll always be Irish people that are popping up in this industry, both on construction sites or designing data centers or operating them. But yeah, it's our willingness to get out there and travel is always is something that I feel quite proud of.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, kind of playing off of what you were just saying too, about the innovation and you know, one of the things that we like to talk a lot about is the fact that, you know, when you look at data centers, there's two words to that. It's data and the centers. And the centers, yes, there are technical aspects and there's things that, you know, there's certain skill sets that we need on the center side, but the data that's driving it all is really driving so much innovation. And so, you know, it's hard to keep up. It's not a surprise that you guys are trying to, you know, that you hired 450 people and you're trying to hire another 450, because there's so much innovation and there's so much that the data is doing that's impacting all of us as well too. So
I think the other thing is there's kind of almost been this veil of secrecy around data centers because of the security risks inherent to data.
Sure.
And the kind of unintended consequence is that there's a lack of awareness of what the data center industry does and how it supports an economy and how it supports industry. And it's also led to the challenge of, you know, operators scrambling to attract the right talent to support the next generation of data centers, which again are just kind of in a really exciting place. And I'm sure Ailish and Barry are probably seeing things even before they get to me in terms of the innovation that we're looking at for the next 5 to 10 to 20 years and how we're designing these data centers.
Great. Well, so what I'd like to do now is just open it up kind of for the four of us just to chat a little bit more. And, you know, each of you has kind of touched on it a little bit. And in terms of the, you know, have passport, real travel, but I think there's also a transportability of the Irish digital infrastructure ecosystem as a whole. I mean, we certainly see it in play, and we've, you know, kind of discussed it a little bit throughout each of the comments that you've all made, because, you know, everybody's got projects that are happening in different parts of the world. And from each of your roles and from each of your perspectives, what do you think are the unique characteristics of the Irish ecosystem that do make it so transportable?
I suppose from my perspective, I think that we've gotten a first mover advantage in the sense that we were very fortunate due to all the ecosystems that Ailish mentioned about corporation tax, IDA, access to power and fibre. I think we got a first mover advantage in relation to acquiring a skill set in critical infrastructure, like pharmaceutical plants that is transportable to critical environments like data centers. I do believe that like we've honed a skill set and an expertise within our supply chain and within the indigenous Irish supply chain that is very transferable to different markets and different geographies, and a methodology of how to deliver and execute works at a scale. And I think that is kind of born from that original ecosystem 20, 30 plus years ago, access to the European Union, being a rock on the west side of Europe, closest thing to Nova Scotia for a fibre to drop into, foreign direct investment, IDA, and then obviously low corporation tax and low outside ambient air temperature, which is always helpful for data centers. So I think that's the kind of ecosystem, but I think we have honed our skills, and we as a sector, we have learned and we've continuously learned, and we've brought that methodology then, that transferable methodology, to other emerging markets and to other locations to support those type of scale of builds.
Yeah, I think that's the foundation of it, and it's the people involved in the industry that keep it going. You know, because you could bring all those skills and then just, you know, it could fall away. It could not, you know, could just not thrive. And that's where I think it's the people and you know, the Irishness that we're talking about that keeps it going in those regions. And like what you said, Barry, was like, you know, we're trying to get even more people on through apprenticeship and schemes like that. But it is, you know, at the core of that, to keep that foundation going is our you know, our work ethic, our adaptability, and our ability just to, you know, get stuck in, you know, and become part of those communities that we get involved in globally when delivering projects.
Yeah, makes sense.
And it definitely feels like it's become, you know, the trades of the past is now really, you know, where we're seeing this. We have this data center trade that is really one of our strengths in Ireland. And I guess I don't know what the appetite is for young people in Ireland now, because I haven't lived there for so long, to travel as much as I guess my generation. And that's something that I guess that I'd like to see more of. I don't know if we're giving as much opportunity to the much younger generation of people coming into this industry in Ireland to really spread across Europe. Definitely, I tend to meet people of my own demographic more so, but I'd love to start seeing and bumping into a younger group that are in the data center operations.
That's the flip of developing data centers, that we don't have to travel anymore. You know,
well, yeah, that's true.
You're orchestrating your own downfall, Jesus. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the younger generation have that option. I suppose we did it out of necessity.
Yeah, we did it out of necessity. Actually, that's what I mean. Is there
Yeah.
is the Irish economy actually doing so well that people don't need to leave as much as they did in the past? I guess that's the question.
It's a really good point. You know, I actually haven't thought about that. I do see I'd say younger Irish people will travel if it's a career advancement. Like there's nothing, like as an educational perspective, there's nothing beats relocating, even doing a rotation to a large campus or a scheme build outside of your comfort zone. And so I do think I do see some kind of junior project managers and junior engineers that are cutting their teeth in Frankfurt, Paris, Amsterdam, Stockholm, etc., with Irish vendors and contractors. And I assume it's because that's the kind of mentorship approach that we have within our organizations, that look at, come over here, do 18 months, you'll learn a lot, you'll understand how to deliver in a different market. You'll also get out of your comfort zone, you know, and you'll see the world. And so I do believe there is that, but I fully agree. We traveled out of necessity rather than optional. And I think, fortunately, the economy is going that well. I think there's quite a lot of opportunities indigenous to Ireland, not in the data center sector, that may be counteracting that.
Mm-hmm. But I think when Ailish, this was kind of part of the conversation that we were having a few weeks ago, but I think one of the interesting elements to all of this is because, like, to your point, Judith, there was the need to do it 20 years ago. There was the need to emigrate. But what that I think has done, and I would imagine kind of tying into today's generation, is that experience of going away, learning different cultural elements, learning your trade, doing these things on projects around the world, and then bringing them back, then for when individuals come back to Ireland, it does kind of instill a little bit of that global worldview, that globalization that is, and was created out of need and is now kind of almost second nature into the way business is done. And I think you do see that, to Barry's point, then too, kind of playing out that way as well.
Yeah, I think I won't try to second guess younger people these days, but I think they're focusing on getting roles in global companies that will give them a sort of a cushion of an opportunity to go out and maybe do a stint in an APAC office, or do a stint in an Americas office, and still with that ability then to come home if they need to. So I know that's what I would do if I was coming out of college.
If you were in your 20s again, that's what
what are you saying? I'm not, Joyce? I mean, but yeah, like I think that's what it is, and companies, are encouraging that and welcoming that kind of rotation process, and kind of I know that we do with our graduates as well. There's a rotation among into the different regions that they can go into, but so I think maybe they're probably getting more of a cushion than we would have got in the past, and then bringing those skills home again, encouraging, it's all chat in the pub and it's all chat over a coffee. It's like, I had a great time here, a great time there, and then that, will feed on. It's just, I suppose it is, it's ingrained into us to go as well, and to move. I think anyway. Yeah,
and you each have touched on this in different parts of your conversation, but just the history of the tech, of how tech industry had evolved in Ireland over the last 50 years, the history of immigration, the history of all these things seems to really be intertwined together, and that's what we're seeing to happen today. We're seeing that the payoff of all that in the digital infrastructure ecosystem, and how you see these Irish teams, show up in all these different projects and stuff around the world, which is really cool. So I want to get us to the Q&A shortly, but there was one other question I wanted to ask that's, kind of turns it all a little bit on its head. And that is, are there any risks that you see for this sustained development, either in or from Ireland over the next decade. I mean, we've all been pretty enthusiastic about, what we're seeing, how it's grown, how it's evolving, the exciting things that are coming ahead. But are there any things that we need to kind of be mindful of, or any potential challenges on the horizon that we should be paying attention to today?
I suppose I wouldn't call it a challenge or a risk. I'd see it as an opportunity, but definitely ESG and efficiency within what we operate and maintain and what we build needs to be a driver for the sector. And we also have to think outside of the box in relation to sustainable funding and sustainable energy associated with the data centers. Like there's currently a moratorium in Dublin in relation to data center builds. We are going to see that, I'd say, more in different municipalities and different countries. And I think we need to be more joined up with where we are moving to, what we're doing not from just a power and usage perspective, but also from a workforce indigenous perspective, right? Because I'm on the project side and we do the job. It's a 24-month big lift, but that data center, it needs to be supported for the next 20 odd years. And like as our core business is the operation and maintenance of data centers within DCS, and that is one of the areas to which we are actively looking at, is bringing people on a journey from a talent perspective. Most places that we're building now in new and emerging markets don't have that skill set, so it's very much looking at different sectors, bringing them on board and driving that. So from my perspective, there the kind of key risks is moving into markets and areas where does not have the data center sector skill set, and we need to be as a team of people in a sector. We need to bring people on that journey with education, graduate programs, mentorships, and buddy systems with established markets, and also ESG. I feel that we need to, as a sector, be more proactive in how we solution out, let's say, power outcomes, because a bit like Ailish touched on, we were very much a very quiet, confidential sector, because of security, etc. But all the press that we get is bad by the very nature, right? So we need to try to change that narrative. Like I've never seen a data center sector news article in any Irish paper that's not given out about the power usage or the water usage, etc. So they're the two things: moving into new markets and risks associated with skill sets, and then as a sector pivoting to be more of a cohesive approach in relation to energy and sustainability.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. And I think it's there's a lot required of governments and planning authorities to think in a much longer term way than they have in the past, which is part of the reason we've ended up in some of the markets as challenged as we have. In the emerging markets, what we're trying to do is actually sit down with city planners now to say, okay, your metro is going to grow with people from an urban perspective. It's just, that's how the world is going. So where are you going? What is your plan? Can we build a data center next to a hospital and run that hospital for you from a power perspective? In Amsterdam, we have the data center right next to the science park, which has the university, and we provide all the power from our surplus heating. So I think there's more openness almost in some of the emerging metros to be able to kind of go, wow, we've seen what's happened elsewhere. We're going to have to plan better and in cooperation. And I feel in some of the more developed markets we're in a catch-up mode. And particularly in Dublin, the narrative is quite negative, and it's created a gridlock, whereas I don't think it's as bad at all as it is. I think the power challenges that we see there, we're going to overcome them pretty soon, and we're probably going to need data centers to actually use all the power that's going to be generated. So there's a lot of, it kind of comes back to that real need for more innovative thinking, which comes back to the need for diversity into from the workforce. Like, I think last year we hired 40% of our operations teams were from non-traditional backgrounds for data center, because we need people that will help us to think differently.
Yeah.
And also challenge, particularly you find people that have come from minority groups tend to have been used to challenging because they've had to challenge to get to where they are. And it's this challenging mentality that we need to bring in to create more innovative ideas and healthy tension to go, why are we doing it like this? Why aren't we doing it a different way? Or that doesn't make sense anymore. So why aren't we thinking in a way more futuristic data center of the future way, as opposed to just a copy and paste? This is what we've done over the last 5 years.
So it's actually, that's a really great segue. I've been kind of peeking at some of the questions that are coming in from the audience listening today, and that's actually, it's perfect. you opened the door perfectly for some of these. So let me dive into this. Ivan asked, how does the data center industry become a Main Street career choice for the next generation? And the comment was, it seems everyone currently has arrived into the industry nearly by chance. And then the question from Ava, which is somewhat related with a little bit of a different twist, was, as pension age is moving from 67 to 70, she's based out of Sweden. Are there opportunities also for this group to train, to change careers and work in data centers, or is it a young people's entrance?
I think it's multi generational right now. Like we particularly in the US, and I think it's something that we're trying to adopt more so here, but it's trying to get the attention of the right channels. But we have an active, and retired military program for people to come in. We have the retired athletes, which I mentioned. We have people that are coming from, particularly post-COVID, where people were in industries like hospitality that got furloughed, or just, were kind of sitting on the sidelines and have come back and going, what do I do now? So it's any of that mindset, aptitude, service, in service to mentality with precision. That type of a thing, that type of a mindset is what we're looking for. And I think you don't have to go and almost do a course beforehand. You can approach us directly to read, because from where I'm sitting anyway, we have an operations digital infrastructure program for new workforce development. So we will be able to tell you what the skill set you need, and we will also help you develop that skill set. That's kind of where the industry is at in terms of really needing people. And I think that's forcing us to also be more open to look at resumes in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't have the same, staff compared to a beast like Equinix, but we would very much see that as well in the industry. We need to start thinking outside the box in terms of encouraging people into the industry, and it is exactly what Judith said. It's you don't have to have come from a data center background to get a data center job. There's just certain skills that are transferable, and then the industry is so open to getting new blood in, because at the moment it is just seems to be a carousel of people just going from one company to another, and they're and we're all big companies like Equinix, smaller ones like ourselves, we're just so open to seeing fresh blood come in.
Yeah, no, great. Okay, so one other question here is from Zhao Zhang. How can Host in Ireland help with the startups in Ireland? So maybe from the panel's perspective, how are you guys working with smaller companies or smaller businesses, and in that kind of taking it in that direction?
Well, I guess it varies by country. In Amsterdam, we have a startup village right outside our data set, one of our campuses. We provide the power to that startup village. And then we are also kind of using some of the smarts from the startup world to be able to come and do stuff at our data centers with customers, and vice versa. We're looking at doing something similar in Warsaw, et cetera, et cetera. So it depends really by country and location and city, but we don't have one program that fits all.
Sure, that makes sense. So
kind of from a CBRE perspective, as we are just the operations side of the data centers, we normally try to look at supply chain and small to medium sized contractors who want to go on a journey and upskill themselves and bring them into this type of environment. And because we kind of have a global business across all sectors, we normally start with them in non-critical environments. They cut their teeth, they learn the methodology, and then we move them into more critical environments like the data center sector. So there's a whole program that we utilize via our supply chain to kind of upskill them and bring them on the journey with ourselves.
Okay. Cool. So it looks like one of the other questions we have is, it goes into a little bit more about the heat recovery that I had mentioned, and I think Judith, you've kind of talked a little bit about it as well. But the question is from Bill and is asking, will data centers be engineered more and more with excess heat recovery in mind for distribution to local communities, and working more in conjunction with the district heating utilities?
100%.
Simple answer.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, there's new regulations coming in. Probably EMEA is leading that. So it's not going to be a nice to have anymore. It's going to be a requirement, I think, in a lot of areas. And I think you'll see EMEA leading the track there. It's I guess again, it's back to hopefully in emerging markets that you could start off at that ground level, like what Judith was talking about, that you're in talking to local communities from the get-go about how we can work together to deliver, district heating, especially if it's a tricky subject and there's a lot of nuances in it, and it's not just easy to do and an easy to implement. But yeah, I think EMEA will lead the way here. It's going to be a given, I think.
Yeah, I think BBC had a story last week, was it, that about in Devon, a local swimming pool had basically an edge compute, kind of data center at the edge. They were using that to power their, heat their swimming pool and save thousands upon thousands of pounds a year on their electricity bills. So it's definitely, I mean, and I saw like, I'm in this industry. I pay attention to that stuff. I'm aware of those things. The fact that it shows up on the 6 o'clock broadcast of the BBC was like, oh, okay, this is now taking it to a whole new level. So
yeah, we have our Paris data center heating the Olympic swimming pool in Paris for the next Olympic Games. So yeah, there's amazing initiatives all over the industry right now. And I think to Ailish's point, it's not a nice to have. It's also something that while there's legislation coming, we're also very much aligned across the industry. This is what we really need to do. The drive for getting our PUEs, which is the power use of energy, the amount of consumption down as low as possible, is something that we have to do as a business for our own profit line, but also to make sure that we're able to keep this as sustainable as possible, because it's not as simple as get rid of data centers. If we did that, we would have the whole economies would come to a grinding halt. And it's not a case of, oh, it's just one cloud we take down. It's nothing like that. The whole thing is so well interconnected now that people's daily lives in places they wouldn't even imagine would be just not possible.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much. Gary, I think you were going to come in and have the final word a little bit. Ireland, 1973. You just went for the background.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, speakers, and thank you, Joyce. I usually come in to close out these gigs, and I'm trying to fill the gaps that I think are the bits that are missing. I'm actually after writing down more stuff that I've learned. So thank you so much for that. But as you suggest, let's start with how Ireland has changed since that first day of January 1973. And Ireland's biggest export, right, was live cattle. When we joined the European Union, our biggest export, well, our two biggest exports was live cattle, and that's the main street in Rialto on the 3rd of January 1973, the open cattle mart going down to the cattle boats. We were exporting live cattle. The second export, of course, was people. So we two major exports. We go forward, and you can see in 2023, where 4% of Ireland's exports today is agriculture related. 27% is ICT and related services. So it's enormous. The change has been quite incredible to live through it. And it's not just ICT, obviously. We've pharmaceuticals, we've life science, we've finance. but I love the phrase that's around the place at the moment where they call it, Ireland has gone from a spud economy to a chip economy. If you don't understand the subtlety of that, you probably need to go and ask Barry, Judith, and Ailish. But I think even then when we talk about Host in Ireland, even our little existence, what are we, 8 years in existence? We may have to look at our name, because in that time when we started, it was to attract data to Ireland. It was to actually show that you didn't have to be a hyperscale to rest your data here. I think we might look at something like Host from Ireland, as 66 to 70% of our partners now are actually looking to expand internationally, including our co-location and managed services, as we say, with Judith and with Ailish, with their centers of excellences here. It's incredible to see that develop. The third thing I picked up was the different backgrounds of the three speakers. It's incredible. We talk about diversification to get into the digital space. Barry started as an apprentice, is now a global leader from Ireland, right? Incredible to go through the different phases. As Judith rightly said, it's now back cool to be an internship or an apprenticeship, because we find that so many kids are falling out of college after 2 years. So it's fantastic. And I think, Judith, you mentioned you were an accountant. Wow, with Deloitte's.
I'm fine now.
You seem to be okay now. How did you know I was going to say that? You seem to have got over it now and you're looking fine. And obviously, Ailish, running with no desire really in the short term to have in Ireland a substance, but still building a team around it. It shows the different layers and the different dividends that Ireland gets from being associated with data for nearly 50 years. Finally, our whole objective when we started this was success through collaboration, as said by Joyce. And I think that it's not just success through collaboration in an echo chamber of data operators or data center operators. You've got to expand it out to the full food chain. And what I'm starting to see now, which really keeps me energized about Host in Ireland, is we're bringing the electron people in. They're part of the food chain, the people who generate the electrons, the people who distribute the electrons, the people who use those electrons to make data, and then the people that export it out of Ireland is a wonderful thing to see. But I have to finish by the second best Irish team and reference them, the Irish rugby team, right? They're the second best. We're obviously the best, right, Barry? This Host in Ireland team. And
Yeah.
what I see when I look at them is they're four very distinct provinces that beat each other up for 10 months of the year. And then they come together for 2 months for the Six Nations or the World Cup. They work as one and then they leave and they beat each other up. And that's what I love seeing with the Host in Ireland family when we travel. We wear the green jersey, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to be contentious with each other when it comes to the tender. But at a certain level, we're trying to project that we work hard. We've learned from our experiences. And to all the speakers' point, we don't really have any choice. We've no gold. We've no oil. We've none of these other natural resources to date. But what we do have coming through, and exactly to Judith's point, we have 15 times more access to electrons than we will ever need. What's data created from? Electrons. So we're going to get over this hump very soon. And then we'll be asking people, be saying, oh, what could we make with all this excess electrons that we can export? Skills, services, and data. So with that, Joyce, I'll hand it back to you. And thank you so much for not taking my suggestion and making an acronym.
Yeah,
no. Data infrastructure ecosystem is DIE. And this was not the place to launch a DIE acronym. Well done.
We will definitely not be doing that, Gary.
We won't be doing that. So thank you so much, speakers. We had over 150 people on occasion live. We've got people on LinkedIn. I'm getting text messages from people saying, can you stay on for another half an hour? Because I missed the first half hour. It's been great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I don't know if Tanya or somebody else is coming in, Joyce, but I'll hand it back to you.
No, I think that's it. I think we'll wrap up. But yeah, just thank you, Judith and Barry and Ailish. I really appreciate you guys joining us today. Enjoyed having this conversation with you. So thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you, everybody, and have a good day.